Funky Marketing Podcast, another episode. And for this one, we have a special guest. I'm going to tell you a few things about him later, but we're going to talk about how customer feedback can transform your marketing strategy. And not only that, we're going to cover a lot of things regarding to the marketing strategy, to the social media marketing strategy trends, but also how B2B companies can get into the D2C and what can they do on that side. So join me in welcoming Andi Jarvis to the podcast.
Nemanja, thank you for having me here. It's always great to be part of anything you're doing, and the Funky Marketing Podcast sounds like it's right up my street, which is why I've worn my funkiest jacket for this.
Sounds good, guys. If you don't know, Andy is strategy director at Eximo Marketing, and he also has a great podcast. Andy, what was the name? Strategy Sessions, right?
Strategy Sessions, yes. So it's an interview podcast. I talk to marketers from around the world. 4 seasons complete. Got a new season starting in mid-September. And it's mainly a chance for me just to ask questions for stuff I find interesting. So people have worked on great campaigns, people doing interesting research, and just trying to get a little bit deeper behind what they're doing, rather than just tell us what you did, but why and what was the thinking behind it and how did it tie into the strategy. So yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Sounds like I have the similar interest, right? And coming to the office this morning, I was listening to the Spotify playlist, and Gangsta's Paradise came up, and I'm like, oh, that's what we talk about when we met in a van in Macedonia going to the hills.
This is it, Coolio, Gangsta's Paradise. This is so. A couple of years ago, we were at a conference together at All Web in North Macedonia. We're heading up, and for some reason, the 2 tallest people in the whole minivan were put in the front seats together. So me and you were kind of wedged into this front seat while we're driving a couple of hours into the mountains, talking about the music on the radio, Gangsta's Paradise. What else? Talk about basketball, didn't we? And the noise that you guys make in the stadiums when the basketball's on and stuff. So we just had a great chat for 2 hours, something like that. It was great.
Yeah, something like that. Okay, so what did I miss when I gave information about you? I missed like how many years in marketing?
So I've been in marketing 22 years now, which so that means I started when I was 3 years old, basically, in marketing, I think. 22 years in marketing. I've been running my own company, Eximo Marketing, for nearly 8 years now, and I run a strategy consultancy where I help companies answer some of the questions that we're probably going to talk about in the next few minutes, and just try and I often say I help companies get back to basics, get the fundamentals right. I think there's an old analogy used about a ship leaving a harbor, and if it leaves 1 or 2 degrees off course, you don't always notice, but when you get 1,000 miles out of harbor, you really notice. And that's the sort of thing I try and do, is help companies get that course right before they go, rather than having to course correct, because that takes a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of resource. So that tends to be what I do. But we'll dig into what strategy is and what tactics are, and I'm sure we'll talk about that soon.
Yeah, it's actually nice to have somebody on the podcast talking about the things that I usually talk about, because usually somebody comes in and asks me, what do you think about AI, about those kind? And I'm like, I tend to go back as people talk more about AI. I said, let's go back to the basics, because usually those are the things which are not fixed, and complex problems often result in having the basics not set up as they should.
Yeah, I've started calling them fundamentals, because as soon as you start calling them basics, people go, oh yeah, we've done that, let's move on. And you're like, okay, have you? And they usually haven't. So fundamentals is generally how I explain them now. But I think it's probably good at this point. The way I separate strategy and tactics is, I would say strategy, and I love analogy as well. So strategy is deciding where you're going to go on vacation. Tactics is how you're going to get there. So strategy is just picking a point that we're going to go to do. So for companies, it's who are we targeting? Why are they going to buy from us? What's our messaging? All that sort of stuff. And then once you know who you're going for, you pick the tactics to go and get them. Now, if you to go back to the holiday, the vacation example, if you don't have a destination in mind, you could go to your local airport. I'm in Belfast at the minute. Go to Belfast. I could get on a flight. I could fly somewhere, get on a bus into town, get a train somewhere else. And I go, oh, this is wonderful. I'm in Marseille. But actually, somebody else who was with me thought we were going to Spain. And the other person who was with me thought we were going to Portugal. Now, we've still been on a flight and we've still, been on a train and we're still having a nice time in the sun and drinking a beer somewhere. But we're not doing the thing we thought we were going to be doing. So it's never right. And that's when you get disagreements, you get friction between people in companies, between departments, all this sort of thing. And if you just have a strategy and you go, oh, look, we've got this great strategy, we're going to Lisbon, but you don't have any tactics, you never get there. You just talk about how wonderful Lisbon is, but you never get to go and experience it. So you need a strategy, you need to know where you're going, and you need tactics. You need to know how you're going to get there. So it's not that one's more important than the other. But I think if you don't spend the time nailing that strategy first, everything else just because if you haven't got those fundamentals right, everything else is a bit pointless afterwards, really.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I want to get you right after this in talking to customers and how important that is for actually coming up with a strategy, understanding the big picture, understanding how are they thinking, because usually if I talk with startups who are trying to come up with something new, especially in a tech, there's the saying, you can do the service, you can ask the customers, but if they don't know that something exists, they won't give you the answers that you need, right? So on one side, you need to actually talk with them, but maybe surveys are not always the best way. So how do we get the exact information from them, and how do we actually get to know them, to to know them better than they know themselves, because that's the way to go.
Absolutely. So Henry Ford and Steve Jobs were 100% right in their view on market research, but they're also the worst thing that ever happened to market research. And to just, I don't even like to call talking to your customers market research. I just like to call it good practice in marketing. And the reason I say that is that if you call it market research, people then think it's somebody else's job to do. But what Henry Ford said about if I'd have asked people what they wanted, they'd have said a faster horse. Absolutely right. Steve Jobs said something about we don't ask people, they don't know what the future looks like, or they don't know what the next product is. They just, they'll just give you an iteration of what you've got. Absolutely right. But that's why you don't ask people what they want. The key to talking to your customers is asking them about their problems. Because if Henry Ford did talk to customers and understand their problems, he understood that people wanted to get from A to B quicker, and they wanted to get there in a more efficient way. They wanted to get there in more comfort. He understood that. So then he solved that problem. He didn't ask them how to solve the problem. That's your job. But you ask them what problems they have. So one thing I hear from marketers a lot is they say, oh, well, we don't talk to customers. We don't run focus groups. We bring people in to do that. And I was like, there's a hierarchy of this, right? Focus groups are wonderful. I love focus groups. I run focus groups for clients. But don't let the fact that you don't know how to run a focus group stop you talking to customers. Deal with a complaint, right? Pick up the phone and talk to somebody. Get somewhere where your customers are. You mentioned tech companies who are developing something. You need to then talk to who you think your ideal customer is going to be. Go and talk to them and ask them about their problems. There's the 3 F's that we talk about here, about the 3 people you never ask for advice, and avoid these 3 people like the plague, which is friends, family, and fools, right? You never ask the 3 F's because they just tell you what they think you want to hear. But for everyone else, find people and ask them a question. Talk about the problems they have in their lives. I did some research like this for someone in the car sector, they were selling cars basically, and we asked the question, what would it feel like if you didn't have your car for one day? So we're not asking them how to solve the problem of fixing this, their website. How do we drive sales up, or what would make you buy more cars from us? Anything like that. if we took your car away for 1 day or 1 week, what would it be like? And then you shut up. And I was amazed at the answers, like the language people used when it comes to talking about this. They used really emotive language. Someone said it'd be like losing a leg. Now, yeah, they were joking a little bit, but losing a leg, not having a car, losing a leg. And you start to hear this and you start there to really start to see things like, okay, this really matters to people. So then this is how we start to drop it. How do we make this part of what we do? Because we really matter to their lives.
Yeah, I love those analogies. And you mentioned one thing, and I think it's extremely important. It's not, should you do it, to talk to the customers to get the feedback, but how do you do it, and what are the questions that you need to ask? Because
Yeah.
you do it for a lot of different reasons. So
Mhm.
you need to ask what do you, exact the right questions to get the answers that will actually help you.
Yeah. It's never a waste of time. And so sometimes customers tell you things that are really interesting and useful, but are never really going to impact your marketing strategy. They might tell you things like, I used a phone number to ring this thing and it took far too long to answer. Or, I spoke to somebody and it's clear that your contact center isn't in this country and I couldn't really. These are interesting tactical things that are useful. They're never wasted, but they're interesting. But sometimes they tell you things that can really impact your marketing strategy. So back to that car example, we realized that actually the role of the car in people's lives is really, really important. And actually, a lot of the comms that we were using about cars was far too practical. So we started looking, if marketing is who are we targeting, why are they going to buy from us, and how are we going to communicate that message? That's what we're looking at in trying to nail a strategy and some objectives. That really influenced what we were doing there. And sometimes you start to do this and you might talk to different groups of customers and find that different groups get different value from your product. And that can then, what I wouldn't say is, you don't talk to a handful of customers and go and tear your marketing strategy up and start again. But what it does is it gives you, it kind of puts lights on the road. And you'll go, oh, there's a lot of lights flashing over there. We need to go and do some work having a look at that. Or there's a lot of lights flashing over here. We need to go and have a look at that. And often what happens in marketing is you're sat in a room with other marketers and other people from your company and product development and
Hmm.
people who love the product. And they think all the lights are flashing in one place over here. And they're not. The things the customers are talking about are over here, because we're very company centric, very product centric, and the customers just care about what it does to them. So for me, talking to customers, it just puts lights on the road that you can then go and investigate some more, which will then impact your marketing strategy. And if nothing else, it'll help change some of the tactical things and make them better for you too.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, you reminded me enough of an example. I work with a Turkish startup. They are doing something which can be called user onboarding, can be
Mhm.
called no-code tool, can be called like project management tool, a lot of different stuff. And they had no idea, you know, in which category should they play and what should
Mhm.
they do, right? So they were talking. Product team was talking with the customers. Also, customer success team was talking with the customers, and me from the marketing side and other guys from the team were listening to the calls. And what we realized is, they should go for 5 different subcategories, not one, right? Because they all call it with different names. And so from a strategic standpoint, what should we do? We need to create content for all these subcategories. Can we do
Mhm.
that or no? Yes. So they went to it, and now they're doing really really good. Another thing was, where are they coming from, right? Because they tested different markets. For example,
Mhm.
they didn't have at the moment to play in UK or in the US, so they tried Russia, they tried Brazil, they tried different, countries who are not the primary markets, the most expensive ones, and Brazil turns out to be their number one market. And so nobody thought about Brazil, but
Mhm.
like actually trying things out, listening to the customers, getting there, they nailed it.
Well, this is where I have a presentation that I make. So we met speaking at a conference, and I do a lot of that in different places. And I, as a marketing strategist, I have a presentation which is about marketing strategy or marketing tactics, which is the most important? And I'm going to give away the answer to this, right? Everybody thinks it's marketing strategy, and you're a marketing strategist. That's what you're going to say. I think if I'd have made that presentation 20 years ago, that 100% would have been my answer. There is a little bit of me now, though. Well, not a little bit. There's a lot of me that thinks, I wouldn't say only do one or the other, but tactical implementation, doing stuff, because we've got a really quick feedback loop with digital tools and digital tactics now, is actually
Yes.
really important. So to go back to my travel analogy, we're sat in Marseille with, I've got Nemanja with me who wants to be in Lisbon, and I've got Dave with me on the other side who wants to be in Malaga. And this is great, but we're sat in Marseille. Now we know we're in the wrong place. We start executing, we get back on the train, we go somewhere, we sell some things, and then we're getting on another train, we go somewhere, we might end up in Paris. But what we realized is that actually in Paris, there's a lot of people who want the thing that we're selling, and they're buying a lot of it. Therefore, maybe actually this is a good place to play. So while I would say that the best and most efficient way to do this is to do the research up front, get your strategy right, pick the place that you're going to play and really get there and go and, go to Lisbon, which is what you said you were going to do, and kick the backside out of it. Sometimes though, if you're going to just, sometimes, especially with new companies, you don't always have that research capability. You don't have the money, or you don't have whatever. So you do sometimes test and learn, and you end up in Brazil selling shitloads of stuff. And you found that Brazil is the right place to play. And as you get more money, then you can do strategy, the more iterative approach, and do it right, maybe right the first time and save some of that cost along the way. But, if you are new to business, just getting out there and doing it is not necessarily a bad thing. And I say that as a marketing strategist who would say, take a pause and at least do the thinking first, but I'm definitely a fan of doing something is better than doing nothing.
Yeah, I totally agree, and we can narrow it down to a simple thing as, do you have the right USP, right? So you may have a few variations of that. You just run, I don't know, like meta ads for 2 weeks for a small amount of money, see which one resonates the best, and then you add a lot of money inside it, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of companies don't think that way. They think, okay, this is the big budget that we have for a month. This is what we're going to go through. And using messages that, if they have smart marketers, they might have tested them in a different way, but usually that's not happening, right? Usually they hire an agency or somebody else to come and just do the execution. And then it comes, we just get the answers, but we pay a lot more to get the answer that we could have, got from the beginning.
Old thinking can take a long time to go. So we're only 10 years away really from websites not being designed by graphic designers, right? Because it was a design thing, wasn't it? And that sort of big, that's how you put big campaigns together. And still there is a lot of common sense in putting campaigns together, testing them, TV ads, outdoor. I'm a big fan of all this stuff if you've got the budget for it. And test, you do a little bit of testing, but then you get it and you run the campaign and hope it works. That's still broadly how it works. But on digital, just little micro test, and then get behind the winner. There are some companies who do that to inform their traditional media these days, but probably not very many from the companies I've spoken to anyway. But yeah, I think marketers learning new skills and understanding the world's changed and changing, it is very important to sort of keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening.
Yeah, when it comes to changes and and us learning how to adapt to all those things, there is one thing that the guy we both know, Rory Sutherland, tends to say, and it is, relying on a data is relying on a past. And I want to put that out there and see your thoughts of, how do we use the data the right way and integrate it inside the strategy, inside the tactics and everything that we do.
So there is, let me just get his name right. There was a guy at All Web in Albania who was called Steen, I think. Steen Rasmussen, that's right. Let me get his name right. So,
Yeah, Steen, I know.
So Steen uses the phrase. So I'm not going to pretend this is mine. People keep talking about data being the new oil. He said it's not. Data's the new ice cream. And the point he makes is that an ice cream is fantastic. You said it's really hot where you are at the minute, right? An ice cream is wonderful when you taste it, when you get it, and it's new. But you leave that for too long, it melts all over your hand and it's useless. And that's a really important point about data, is that it expires, it ages, it gets old in some sectors really, really quickly. So I think the financial markets have it right. Over here in the UK, every time you see an ad for a financial product, they have to have this line in which says past performance is not a predictor of future performance. Basically, yes, we might have grown by 30% a year for the last 10 years, but we can't guarantee that's going to happen in the future. I think it's the same with data. The more recent the data, the more useful it is. But what I would say, it goes back to a little bit that what I was saying about the approach to market research and the Henry Ford thing. If you just look and say, this data's old, I'm not looking at it, I think that's probably the wrong idea. If you look at, say, this data's 5 years old, I'm going to use it for every single decision, probably the wrong way. But I think the older the data gets, the more you're just looking for patterns and cycles. And does something repeat? Does the same thing tend to happen over and over? That's what you're looking for, pattern recognition. The more new the data is, the more relevant and the more you can at least make some sensible bets on it. But you have to remember with strategies that strategy, I hate the line, the best way to predict the future is to create it. Because literally you cannot create the future. Like I can guarantee you what I'm going to do next because I have full control over that as a company. But I can't guarantee what my competitor's going to do. I can't guarantee that a private equity firm isn't going to buy in one of my competitors and invest a huge amount of money in it. I can't guarantee that a new startup's going to come along with a product that's better than mine, cheaper than mine, and available quicker than mine. So I can't just invent the future. I can only invent my future and react to what's around me. So you can use that data to try and predict what you're going to do in the future. And I'm a fan of what I'd call emergent strategy, which is making some plans and saying, right, here's a lot of different options. We're going to decide to do this one. But as things emerge, we will stay nimble, we will move, we will, okay, if we have to pull back from that and invest in this. So strategy is not a one and done, as the Americans would say. We don't just do strategy, hand it over, let's hold the document in the air and wave it, and then I'll come back in 3 years' time and do you another strategy. We do a whole process once a year, but we really need to be reviewing this regularly to see, do we need to course correct?
Yeah, I totally agree. And this is something that I'm seeing a lot, that people confuse like plan and strategy and those kind of things. Like plan, it depends only on us, and strategy depends on external factors as well. So they might change how we actually get to the goal.
Yeah. There's a guy called JP Castlin who, if you're on LinkedIn, is worth following. Now, he talks about complexity theory, which I'm probably going to make it sound even more complex than it is. But basically, he says that the adjacent possibles, and you can't predict what's coming next. So you can broadly predict what's going to happen in the next 10 seconds accurately. 10 minutes fairly accurately, 10 hours, 10 days, 10 weeks, 10 years, your accuracy decreases because you can't predict how all these other things are going to do. There are just lots of doors that you can open. And the thing and this is where that sort of strategy and tactics thing links together, is that you could look at, as a strategist, there could be 20, 30, 50, 100 doors you could ask your company to walk through. And to say that there is only one of those is the right door and 49 of them are the wrong ones is incorrect. The reality is that of those 50 doors, 30 of them or 40 of them are probably sort of correct. And how you implement what you're going to do, how you deliver those tactics, how you course correct when you need to do, how you invest, how you respond to problems with your product, how you respond to new people in the market, will all help you decide if that's going to be a success or not. Just strategists just saying, I have a really good piece of paper with all the information on you need for success. It's bullshit, right? What we're supposed to do is help to reduce the odds of getting the door wrong. That's all we're really trying to do as strategists.
Exactly. I love that example. And that's always a thing. You're probably seeing the same thing as I am. You come to the company, you help them, get the strategy and those things, but execution of the strategy is, dependent on who is actually doing the execution. Does that person actually, feels the strategy, knows exactly the customers, knows the company, and before that, I mean, do you have the right asset to implement the strategy? I mean, we can talk
Yeah.
about it. You create strategy by the asset that you have, not just,
Hmm.
as you come up with it. But one thing that I saw in a couple of research that came out in the last few months is that even the biggest companies who already have a strong brand presence are still investing in brand, because if they invest in performance part, basically what happens is that if they leave the brand out of it, they start losing in the long run. So they understood it, especially looking at the economics and how the situation is these days. So my question goes from the start, when we actually create the strategy and we start building a brand or rebuilding, however do you call it, what are those small things and small steps that companies can install to kind of build the brand in the long run?
Yeah, look, and it's a great point. Is that performance marketing arrived on the scene 10, 15 years ago, and suddenly declared that they were marketing. And I'm fond of saying performance marketing is not the same as marketing performance. Right? It's a very small subset that does really, really well, generates money, and is wonderful. I love performance marketing, but it's not marketing. It's one area of marketing, and but you need to invest in it. There's a bit of research called the long and the short of it, which says broadly look at 60-40, sort of brand building, 40% performance. Changes by sector, right? But the key takeaway is that you should be investing in both. Don't, some companies just go all in on performance. Yeah, some companies go all in on brand. You got to eat while you dream, right? You got to sell some stuff. So I think the key thing for me, so you said, what are the small steps companies can do about brand? I think the brand on a holistic level, or branding, I think the key thing is consistency. Marketers get bored because you see your brand every single day and you want to change it. Like, look at the greatest brands of all time. And yes, they have evolved and they've changed and they've moved on. People say, oh, Coca-Cola never changed their logo. They have about 7 times, 8 times in 100 and however many years, right? And mostly you can draw a line through them and you can see where they're going. Look at the great brands. They are consistently the same. There's a marketing professor called Mark Ritson who loves Kit Kat. Kit Kat looks almost identical as it did in about the 1950s or 60s, right? And it's still the top selling chocolate bar in the UK, I think, by a million miles. So consistency is really important. Stop changing the colors. Stop worrying about all these other things. Just stick with your brand and really drive it home. The other thing is, you touched on something earlier on about people not what people in the company and implementing strategy. And like, people are busy. Nobody turns up at work today thinking I've got nothing to do, or very few people do. And very few people turn up at work thinking, I wonder what my job is today to help make this strategy better, or what is my job to help build our brand a little bit further. Some marketers do, but most people don't. You have to make it matter to them. So if you're in a company that has more than one employee, more than just you have to make everybody else have a really simple understanding of what that brand is and what that should mean to your customers. So if you've got a brand statement that says, our mission is to be the world's #1 provider of ABC to customers like XYZ who do these things for these people in these territories around the world. Nobody is interested anymore. Everybody is bored shitless already, and literally no one can remember it. Whenever I go into companies and say about brand, I was like, what does your mission statement be? And everybody just glazes over and nobody can remember it. And you have to be able to make it easy for people to remember so they can wake up every morning and go, I'm doing this thing that's going to help get to there. And it can be an analogy, it can be a simple statement, it can be one sentence. Keep it really simple. And then let people know that and use it everywhere. Don't get bored of it. Every time you give a presentation to the team, use the statement. Put it on the homepage of the intranet. Put it on the email signatures. Put it everywhere. Because your brand isn't that nice little logo that you've got. It's every time your brand says, oh, we're customer friendly. That's brilliant. And then they ring you up and they have to stay in a queue for 73 minutes because your call is important to us. No, it's not. right? Just because it says it's important, it doesn't mean it is, because you're showing them it's not important. Make everything you do bring that brand to life. Every little interaction, every time the customer engages with you, they will make a judgment on your brand. So if you're going to focus on that, and if you don't have, a branding campaign is wonderful, but I would invest the time and effort in making sure every time a customer interacts with your brand, they get a standardized experience that leaves them going, wow. And if you're a small company thinking, how do we tackle the big companies? This is 100% easier for a smaller company to do than a bigger company. If you're a company of 5, 10,000 employees, this is really hard to do. If you're a company of, less than 1,000, it's much easier to do, much, much easier. So that's where you can stand out and you can really blow your customers' minds in a way that's really difficult for the big guys to do.
Yeah, you actually nailed it, because I think in today's world, like customer experience is the biggest differentiator, right? Because there are a lot of companies with similar products. Everybody's active in front of the company, but do they actually make it easy for the customers to buy, right? When they are ready to buy.
Yeah, I think you mentioned USPs earlier, and I'm not convinced that a USP exists generally. I think there's a handful of products that have actually a unique selling point or proposition or whatever. Most companies offer a very similar product, and they'll say, "Oh, ours is this or it's that," and it really isn't. I think the two ways that are easy enough to stand out for many companies are in your tone of voice, because that's really hard to copy, and your customer experience. And that's where talking to your customers helps. If you can understand what they want or what problems they have, and if people are saying things like, if I lose my car, it's like losing a relative, you can use that and go, right, okay, so we're a vehicle breakdown service, and you ring us up and you've broken down, you go, oh yeah, we'll be with you in 5 hours, 4 hours maybe, or we can't give you a time, but we'll be there at some point. That's great. But when someone's giving you that and saying it's like a relative dying, it's like losing a leg, you say, okay, we guarantee you we'll be there wherever you are within an hour. You don't have to compete on price at that point, because if you're saying, but you have to hit that guarantee. But if you turn up to people's broken down cars within 1 hour, wherever they are, or your money back, I'll pay you more for that service than I will a cheap service when I don't know whether they're going to turn up, because this matters to me. It really matters to people. So that's how you can, that customer experience and that tone of voice. I think they're really difficult for people to copy. And again, bigger companies find it really difficult to copy those sorts of things, because it's hard. Corporate, changing the tone of voice for a big corporate, really, really difficult. Really difficult. Too many people invested in it.
Yeah, you reminded me now, again, you reminded me like 10 minutes ago, and now again, of the scene from This Is Us, where the guy actually goes to buy a car for he has a kids, family, and those kind of things, and they offer him like some sports car and this kind of thing. He said like, this is all I ever wished for, but I need to get my wife and my kids safely from point A to point B.
Yep.
And then he explains, and this is actually the content that some of these companies actually got into the TV series, right, to talk about this. So where I'm going with this, what's actually the role of the content today? If you want to have the perfect experience for the customers, and actually if I look at it from that perspective, like how do we buy, especially now in B2B, for example, we have small communities, we have social media, we have people that we trust, that we can call, and basically the goal of all this is that our name comes up when they ask inside on social media, in those communities, or if we call people, but we get them there through giving them exactly what they need to get in each step of the buyer's journey. So now content comes into play.
Yeah, and I think content is important in solving those problems at different places. And look, customer journeys are, I love the ADA model because it has a simplicity to it, but no one ever really buys in those 4 simple steps. Maybe in like fast-moving consumer goods and buying chocolate bars, yes, that certain things they do move that, but a lot of purchases, especially as the ticket price goes up, they get more involved. Google's messy middle is a great model for how kind of people bounce backwards and forwards at different times. So it's a really important point, I think, of understanding what that buyer journey is. And we have to remember in marketing that we're only ever caricaturing, right? If you've got thousands of customers, you're not trying to understand every single thing that every single person does. You're trying to create a broad map that says, okay, most people go through these stages, and then the content is there to solve the problem. I think the one thing I would say with some content from some companies is that solving the problem becomes the end. So what problem does the customer have at this stage? Let's solve that problem for them. I think there's another bit that I would add on, which is let's solve that problem for them and move them to the next stage of the buying funnel. It's only a small change, but I think that we have to always remember that we are trying to sell something. And marketers should be really comfortable by saying, we're trying to sell stuff. That's our job. Selling more shit is what we do, right? We need to do that. Because if you don't do much of it, we're all out of work. So I think, just trying to move people through and getting the right content in the right place at the right time. It sounds simple, but this is where marketing gets more complex because, well, do you prefer watching a video or do you want to read it? Do you want to read a blog? Do you want to see some bullet points? Do you want to watch a video on YouTube for 15 minutes, or do you just want to watch a 25-second TikTok to go, oh right, that's how I do this thing? Or all of those things, depending on what the problem is and how much time you have and how good your internet connection is. And so look, content planning gets more and more difficult every time you go through the process. But I think that the thing for me is make fewer bets and do them right. So if you mentioned that company you worked with in Turkey, you've got sort of 5 different markets you're in, 5 in different countries, and if you're trying to do all of those things all the time, so many companies go, it's not really working for us. And when you step back and you look at it, you go, yeah, it's because you're half-arsing 5 things. Let's get really good at this one thing, and when that's working, we'll move on to that one, and when that's working, we'll move on to 3, and when 3's working, we'll do 4 and 5. And often companies go off, and strategy is about making choices and make those choices and then go hard. And I think we need to be focused a lot more on excellence rather than just doing. I know I said, yeah, you're better off just doing. I did say that. That was me 10 minutes ago. But doing things brilliantly and delivering and then moving on to the next thing rather than trying to spin all the plates.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't say actually do things just for the sake of doing, right?
No, definitely.
Because there is a trap, and I think we need to mention it because inside the companies, usually there are like 10 eyeballs having thoughts and opinions about everything that marketing does, right? And if that happens, nothing goes out, and you need it to go out because it's not me, you, or them who need to decide what's actually resonating with the target customers. It's the customers that will give us the answers.
Yeah, amen to that. Yeah, and look, marketing's difficult. You got all these people who want to make everything perfect before it goes out, and sometimes done is better than perfect, so ship it. And then you've got, and I've been in this job sometimes as a consultant, and when I was in-house before, you've got your boss who says, do this thing for this market, and then you sat in another meeting where somebody who's really important in the company says you should focus on that other thing that's very different. And then the finance person says you should focus on this, and then the sales guy tells you to focus on that. And because they're all senior, they're all, have really important job titles within the company and can make your life difficult, you start to try to please everybody, but you end up doing 7 things badly. And it's really difficult, especially if you're junior, to say, no, I'm doing this one thing and I'm doing it really well. And when I've done it well, I'll come on to your thing. That's really difficult to do. But the more you get comfortable with it, I think the better it'll be for you and for the company.
Yeah, I totally agree. But let's talk a little bit about how you actually help companies, because that's kind of interesting. I've been doing the whole process in reverse, like B2C companies coming to me because they now have like B2B product and they want to create awareness for that so that people know that they actually have like enterprise B2B product. But you are doing a different thing, coming up with manufacturers doing B2B and help them, install D2C, function inside all of what they're doing.
Yeah. So direct to consumer is it's the sort of thing that comes up in every B2B companies, not every B2B, but certainly companies who make things, manufacturers who uh, once a year in a board meeting, somebody will come up with it and go, we should sell this direct. And why? Well, the maths is simple, right? Your product is €100 retail and you're selling it for €8. And you're thinking, well, hold on a minute, that's €92 that we're not getting. And if we sold, we sell 10,000 of these, therefore, if we sold we could make a load of money. We could be making more money than we ever dreamed of. This is fantastic. But there's a reason, right? Companies are weird. Companies have great skill sets at certain things, and over time they become very good at doing a particular thing. Manufacturing companies are great at manufacturing, and the reason they're great at manufacturing is they don't waste any time dealing with customers and selling shit to these strange people who keep walking in going, have you got it in purple? Can I have it in green? Or, does it do this? Or that's broken. Can you sort that out? They don't do that. They send one pallet of stuff with 10,000 into one customer and they leave all that to somebody else. It's a very different skill set. And there's a reason why retailers don't manufacture stuff, because they're just set up to do something else. So it's a very, while financially and on a piece of paper, it sounds like it makes a lot of sense. Does it? And so the first part of the process I have is what I call pre-flight checks, where what we do is basically kick it around and go, is this actually a good idea? Are you ready for what this actually means? The investment that it's going to take? Because it's like, oh, we just need a website. And, I know someone who built a website at university. Like, no. Oh, your brand is a B2B brand. It's not a consumer brand. So you need a new brand. You need a website. How are you going to ship this product? How are you going to deal with customer service? Do you have a team in place? What are you going to do with returns? What's the level of returns going to be? Are you ready for that? Are you going to scrap them? And often you just see the faces starting to glaze over going, oh, maybe and that's perfectly fine, right? Because strategy is about choices. So if you make a choice to not do something, that allows you to focus your time and energy on becoming the best manufacturing company you can be. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. That, you will win in where you are playing if you focus. But for some companies, they go, yeah, do you know what? We want to do this. And then you've got the process of launch, which is you've got to go from being a manufacturer to being a retailer. And that's, you need skills, you need different people, you need different things, you need websites, you need processes, you need to, and do that. And then once you've got that, you're into orbit. And then you say, okay, how do we make the boat go faster? How do we sell more? How do we sell more? So it's a long-term commitment. It's not just a flash in the pan. It's something that you've got to go through the process with. I don't usually like starting just at the launch. I much prefer the pre-flight checks, because this is, make sure we're not making any mistakes before you invest big in it. But yeah. So that's what, the why is always, we think we can make more money with this. Always the start of the point. But, if you're a manufacturer, it's not always that straightforward. And I hope I haven't turned anybody off, because if you're interested, please give me a call. I'm really interested in working with you. But the fact is, I spend the first part of the engagements going, are you sure this is what you want to do? Because deciding no is the right answer is brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. And you now reminded me of a thing that I'm seeing more and more often, like working with mid-size or enterprise level companies, usually as a consultant or coming with from the strategic standpoint, eventually, starting from a few smaller workshops and then building up the momentum, when I take over the strategy. But the thing that I'm seeing is like, sure, if the company hires me to do a workshop for, I don't know, like lower management, then to higher management, then to the executive board, like if I actually have like a course, for example, talking about that topic, all of those people will actually also buy it. So it comes like the D2C moment when like, all of them have that amount of money, right? And it would be useful for them outside of my presentation and my workshop, right? A new thing. And not many people actually talk about it. Like, I don't know, Zineb was in Albania on All Web, not in Macedonia, so you haven't met her. But she had a lecture called "We Are All Sitting on Gold," and it comes to the companies, but also to the to all of us people, right? So we all have a brand. It can be a company brand, it can be a personal brand. We all can invest in merch, we can invest in different things, but we just don't do that for some reasons.
There's a lot of reasons why people don't invest in those things, and it can be time reasons, it can be finance, it can be maybe there's just something that looks like there's more gold in it, and especially as an independent consultant, sometimes other things are just more interesting. There's a couple of things that I could perhaps do or get into that could possibly make me a lot of money, but
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know if my heart's in them. Right? If I don't believe it's going to be, I enjoy what I do, and I get a lot of value from that enjoyment. And if I'm not going to get that enjoyment from it, well, is it really? So
Yes.
sometimes there are good reasons for not doing things, and you make those choices. And I think the older I get, the more I realize that there is no right choice. There are a number of doors we can open, and every one of those can be the right choice if you get behind it and deliver it properly. If you kind of walk through one of those doors and go, oh yeah, I'm going to do this thing, these are the people you see on LinkedIn who, 1 week they're an expert in cryptocurrency, the next week they're an expert in AI, the week after they're an expert in 3D printing. And what they're doing is they're just walking through a door, coming back, going through another one, come back, going through another one, or as we say in England, they're throwing shit at a wall and hoping something's going to stick. Get through a door, get behind it, and go for it. And that's I think the right way to go about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I look at you, I look at myself, I look at a lot of other people who are like, I don't know, since 2019, 20, whatever it is, on LinkedIn, in that space, talking about the same things, right?
Yeah.
Over and over again. And you mentioned a point when you actually get to the point when you are bored with yourself and talking about things. That's actually the point when you started to get the returns of it, right?
Yeah.
And you need to go for it, because like what happens next is people come to you inbound. You already created sort of a awareness, demand, however do we call it.
Hmm.
People come to you and they are coming to you asking, uh, you know do you know about Andy? Did you work with Andy? I listened to him on a podcast, but does he actually know how to do the thing?
Yeah.
Right? And they say yes, yes, yes. So they are coming and saying, hey, I talked with 5, with 10 people, and they all said the same name. So I'm coming to you.
I'm coming to you. Yeah. And I think you mentioned about consistency, and it's really important. So if you think my email list, I think has an open rate of about 12%, 13%. It's not great. I wish it was more. But when I say I wish it was more, I wish it was closer to 20, right? But think about that for a minute. So if I say the same thing all the time and I get my dream and I get a 20% open rate, that means of every 10 people who get that, 8 of them are never going to see the thing I've written. Not going to see it. It'll be swept up, it'll be deleted, it'll be in a junk item. They're on holiday, they're ill, they're doing something else. They're just going to press delete. They didn't see it. And they didn't see the next one or the next one or the next one. So keep banging that drum, keep saying the same thing. Because as long as you believe in it and it's still relevant, and keep saying it, keep saying it, keep saying it. So I see we've got a question. Sorry you can tell I host a podcast. I'm like, oh, we've got a question. Sorry, I'll shut up and let you, because I think it's about consistency. I was like, oh, maybe that's the time I pick it up. Sorry.
Yeah, it was actually a comment from Boban, because we mentioned consistency, but he said the problem is more in the direction of the presence, considering like the whole brand image.
Look, I think there's nothing worse than being consistently wrong about something, right? So you've got to. I think that's why I say just walk through the door and do it and do it and do it. Yes, but that's why I think strategy is important about making those choices, looking at that data, not too old data unless you're looking for patterns. It's ice cream, but look for the data. Look at the options you've got. Look at the money you've got. Look at the market you've got, and then make a bet, make a decision to chase something, and then be consistent with it. because yes, if you are incorrect, if it's all wrong, then you just, if you're wrong, you're wrong, right? But I think with marketing, with brand, it's not that there's one answer. We're not physics, right? There isn't a right answer and a wrong answer. There are various shades along the way, and you can be mild. Maybe you would have been more successful if you'd have been a little bit more right. But I think you can still be moderately successful and then course correct and be a bit better and a bit better and a bit better. So I think, there's cheers for the question, Boban. But I think, consistency is important, of just making sure that you and your company are known for that one thing.
Yeah, I mean, especially today, right? It's easier than ever to produce content. We're not talking about quality content in general. With AI, with those kind of things, and if you are just being consistent at producing any kind of content, you will definitely get some traction. Will it be the right traction? That's the question, right? And that comes the strategy. Do you know your customers and all those things? So it's not just about producing any content and being there for them every day. Sure, but is what you are saying actually resonating with them? Because that's the moment when they start looking at you as as a trustful person or a brand. And in today's role, I think trust is the one thing that actually makes them decide if they're going to buy or no.
Yeah, and I think some of the signals, now these are sort of indicators you don't get until later down the line, but if you're just, you say, about quality content, if you're just turning out any old shit and yeah, of course I can get ChatGPT to pump this out, that's great. But when you get into the sales process, maybe this is more of a B2B thing, but when you get into the sales process, you start to see the same problems. You start to have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 meetings with a client before the sale goes through. There, you have to spend a lot of time giving them confidence, trying to get them to trust you. You end up negotiating on the price because they're not so sure. Once you get them on board, they become the worst client in history because they're forever pushing and asking for something different, and we don't do this, and it's not. And what's happened is, you blame the client for this. You say, "Oh, it's the client, they're doing this. The client's a nightmare." The client, actually, the problem is probably the shit content you're creating as part of your sales process, because the right content that attracts the right customer for you will shorten your sales cycle and make it really easy. Think of the last thing that you bought really quickly. And so I use StreamYard for recording my podcasts, and someone who I trusted recommended it to me. I looked at it and went, "This is exactly what I need." Bang, 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 and bought it because it was a problem. It was a product that solved my problems, and I bought it. I've looked at loads of other tools online for editing stuff and this and that and the other, and I can never find the right tool. And because StreamYard solved that problem, and I went to buy it straight away. And if you're going through a long sales process, it's because you're not solving the problem for them, and you're not bringing them to the door ready to buy. And then you get but then you need the money because you've been in 9 meetings with these. That's 9 hours of your time. Plus you've prepared 3 pitches. So you're like 3 days in already. You just need to close the sale. So you close the sale because you have to do, and you take a hit on the price because you have to close the sale. And then you've got the wrong client on board, but you've got 3 wrong clients because every time you're doing it, you're doing the same thing. And what happens? Work's just a nightmare. Everyone hates it. Everyone in the team hates it. Your onboarding team hates it. Your sales team hates it. You hate it. That's because you've got your marketing wrong up front. You've not got the strategy right. You're delivering cheap content, not good content. And it all starts to go wrong from there. So I'm a big believer in stop blaming the client for the problem and start looking at your steps that got you to there, because most of the time, 95% of it is within your gift to change. There are some really bad clients out there. There genuinely are. But I think you probably see one of them a year in all the companies I work with. And the bulk of the bad clients are actually the companies I'm working with, or even me. I've done it before. I bought, let the wrong client on board. And it's always your own fault. Always.
It is. It is. I mean, that's the great ending of this podcast, and I wouldn't get.
It's always your fault.
To add other things to it. This is the moment when I usually say to the people, now it's your time to go back to the beginning, listen to everything again, stop, because Andy shared a lot of nuggets over there. And if you have anything that is unclear or you want to know more about it, you can always send Andy a message. check him out. I'm sure he will respond when he's not chasing planes and, and traffic and all those other things.
Oh, geez, yeah. I spend an awful lot of time traveling, sadly, but which I love. I don't get me wrong, I love it. But yeah, please do. I think there's a link to connect me on LinkedIn. Andi Jarvis, Andy with an I, and send me a message if you have a question or if you want to chat. I love talking about this, as I'm sure. I hope you've noticed and come across that. I'm really passionate about it. So, drop me a question if you want.
Yeah, feel free to also find in the description of the podcast the links to Andy's podcast and website and all those other stuff. Check it out. Andy, any thoughts for the end?
I think marketing's difficult. Marketing's hard. It should be fun and you should be enjoying yourself. And to get there, talk to your customers, right? If you hear from your customers, it makes it easier to get it right, and that makes it more enjoyable. So bring the customers in, bring them in, listen to what they have to say.
Love it. Thanks, Andy. Guys, thank you for watching, for listening, no matter what you are doing. And as I always say for the end, keep it funky and see you in the next episode.